Hey guys, now this is just going to be a quick comparison of the iPad Air versus the iPad first gen. I know this comparison is a bit unfair, but I just like to give you guys an idea of the differences between the iPad Air and the iPad first generation if you're planning on upgrading. So let's start off with the thickness of the devices. The new iPad Air is impressively thin, and compared to something like the iPad first generation, it's probably half the thickness of the first generation, and there you go. Now, if you look at the bezels are drastically reduced on the iPad Air. Probably half the size of for the sides. It's probably half the thickness for the bezels on the iPad Air. The top bezels are on the same thing, but the first generation iPad Air does not have a front-facing camera, so that's why the bezels are better on this. If you look on this device, it's still fairly smooth, just like all iOS devices. It's been well optimized. It still has a notification tray, but like I said in my review, it has that nasty notification tray with that ugly background compared to this nice background over here. Now this iPad, the first generation iPad can't be upgraded to iOS 7, so it won't have many of the nice refinements with iOS 7. It doesn't have that control center, which you can find over here. It also doesn't have that new multitasking, as you can see over here. But it does have the original. It does have iOS 5's multitasking, where it just gives you the images of the apps, the icons. Aside from that, this in general is a much better iPad. The quality of the display is way higher. This display has half the pixels of this display. The Retina display is much brighter, much sharper than what you can find on the iPad first generation. So battery life as well has been drastically improved on the iPad Air. I've been noticing around 12 to 13 hours of battery life while playing movies and such, or even web browsing. I've noticed really high battery life. Well, on this thing, on the other hand, I used to get around 10 with it for web browsing and basic reading, but these days the battery's dwindled quite a bit as the device has aged, and now I only get maybe around like 7-ish hours. So I'm just if you're upgrading from a first gen, it's a great time to upgrade. Aside from that, the iPad, the first generation iPad has the full size connector rather than the new Lightning connector. The speakers are also mono, just at the bottom, while this has stereo speakers on the back of the tablet. This one's curved while that's flat. And as you can see up top, there is no back-facing camera, the rear-facing camera, and there's also no front-facing camera. As I said before, the tablet's much heavier than the iPad Air, and holding this with one hand could get tiring pretty quickly, while the iPad Air is probably as light as the iPad Mini. So again, I have to congratulate Apple for that. It's the iPad Air is a great device in its thinness, and the name really suits it because it indeed is the iPad Air, just like the MacBook Air, which is super thin and super light, and has impressive amounts of power for that small package. But yeah, guys, upload times on this are going to be much longer because of the much slower processor. For example, I'll try to time this exactly so that you can see the upload times. If I click the calendar over here, 1, 2, 3, go. The calendar over here is already loaded while this was loading up. And again, this has the uglier, older version of the calendar rather than the nicer version with iOS 7. Something like messages, iMessage, for example. If we open that, 3, 2, 1, go. Again, there aren't that many messages on the new iPad Air, but it is much faster in loading that as well. Then let's just go to something like, let's open up the Notes app. 3, 2, 1, go. And this time I believe it actually opened up faster on the iPad, the first generation iPad, which I'm surprised at, but that's a possibility occasionally. Now I believe Newsstand is not on here, but there should be reminders. Now if we open reminders, 3, 2, 1, go. Reminders was quicker on the iPad Air, which is to be expected. The thing is, the iPad Air is also running many different applications. As you can see, is running those gains from before from my review and other stuff. So because of that, that may be slowing it down slightly. But even if that's slowing it down, it's still running exceptionally fast, which just goes to show how much of an improvement it is compared to the original iPad. The original iPad just loads everything slower. Let's just have one more app test. I'll quickly close out the iBooks here, just so we get an idea of how fast iBooks opens up. 3, 2, 1, go. And on the iPad Air, it is already up and loaded up, while the iPad first generation is still loading up. So, as you can see, it's much faster. So if you guys are coming from a first generation iPad, I definitely recommend that you guys upgrade. It's definitely well worth your money. And with newer features such as LTE and such, the iPad Air is a future-proof installment which you can use for several years to come.